You're not here by accident. This moment didn't find you randomly. This message arrived in your awareness because you've been walking a path few can see and even fewer understand. It's a journey marked not by applause but by silence, not by ease but by testing, not by external validation, but by an unshakable inner pull towards something beyond the visible, beyond the explainable, beyond the ordinary. If that stirs something deep in your spirit, if your chest just tightened, or your breath slowed for a second, then listen closely. What you just endured wasn't punishment. It wasn't divine rejection. It wasn't a sign you'd gone off course. It was preparation, sacred, intentional, soul-level preparation. You've already passed your final examination, not the kind with desks and timers, but the one that happens in the quiet corners of your heart, in the lonely hours when no one sees you choosing integrity over convenience, kindness over retaliation, faith over fear. No certificate was handed to you. No crowd cheered, but heaven took notice, because this test wasn't about how loudly you proclaimed your faith. It was about how quietly you held it, when everything around you screamed doubt. That season you just walked through, it wasn't random chaos. It was divine architecture. Every delay, every closed door, every unanswered prayer was placed with precision. Not to break you, but to reveal who you are beneath the noise, beneath the performance, beneath the need to be seen. Most people mistake this trial as abandonment. They interpret silence as rejection. They assume that if God were truly with them, the path would be smoother, the answers clearer, the support stronger. But for those called to carry higher frequencies, those entrusted with deeper assignments, the path is refined through fire, not paved with comfort. Isolation wasn't exile. It was recalibration. The people who drifted away, they weren't meant to walk into your next dimension. Their frequency couldn't sustain the energy of where you're headed. The doors that slammed shut, they weren't failures, they were divine redirections, protecting you from paths that looked promising but would have diluted your purpose. The prayers that seemed to vanish into the void, they weren't ignored. They were being held in sacred trust until your foundation could bear the weight of the answer without crumbling under its glory. And here's the truth that changes everything. The test wasn't about perfection, it was about direction. When exhaustion pressed in like a physical weight, did your energy still lean toward truth? When betrayal cut deeper than you thought possible, did you protect your peace instead of retaliating? When temptation whispered that compromise would bring relief, did you refuse to trade your essence for temporary ease? You did, and that's why you're still standing. This crucible stripped away every external crutch, relationships that drained you, validation that tied your worth to others' opinions, even the hope that outcomes would define your success. It left you with only one thing to stand on, the unshakable presence of the divine. Not because you needed to suffer, but because you needed to know yourself beyond circumstance, beyond results, beyond what the world calls success. And yes, feeling drained didn't mean you failed. Doubt didn't disqualify you. Even moments of anger, grief, or confusion didn't cancel your calling. What mattered was this: you never quit on the source. Even when you questioned yourself, even when your faith felt like a flickering candle in a storm, you kept showing up quietly, faithfully, without fanfare. Now, let's talk about the silence, because that's where the deepest work happened. That season when heaven felt distant, when guidance vanished, when prayers returned only echoes, that wasn't absence. It was sacred space. The divine didn't go quiet because you disappointed them. They went quiet because they trusted you enough to stop holding your hand. Think about it. In the beginning, guidance comes often through signs, feelings, clear confirmations because you're learning to walk. But there comes a point where constant reassurance would actually weaken you. It would keep you dependent, not mature. So the silence came, not to punish you, but to see what you'd do when no one was applauding your obedience, to see if your faith was rooted in relationship or just in rewards. And in that silence, you discovered something rare. You learned to listen inward. You developed spiritual muscles that constant noise would have atrophied. You stopped needing emotional fireworks to feel close to the divine and began recognizing their presence in stillness, in restraint, in the quiet certainty that you were not alone, even when you felt utterly solitary. That silence also cleared the field. Too many voices, too many opinions, too much emotional static pulling you in 10 directions at once. The divine doesn't compete for your attention. So everything else had to go quiet first, so you could finally hear your own truth again. Yes, it hurt. It dragged buried wounds into the light. It forced you to sit with questions you used to drown in distraction. But healing doesn't happen in noise. It happens in stillness. While you were begging for external change, the divine was doing deep internal surgery, rebuilding your foundation, refining your discernment, strengthening your surrender. And every single prayer, heard fully, completely. But sometimes the answer isn't a word. Sometimes it's endurance through the fire. Sometimes it's transformation of your very being. Sometimes the silence itself is the answer. Because only silence could forge the kind of faith that stands when everything else falls. In that season, you learned restraint. Not every emotion needs to be expressed. Not every injustice needs to be defended. Not every wound demands a reaction. You chose wisdom over impulse, peace over proving. And that restraint? That's not weakness, it's the mark of true spiritual authority. Because authority without self-control becomes chaos. You were tempted to walk away, to give up, to declare that this path wasn't worth the cost. But that temptation was woven into the design of the test. Would you stay loyal when faith felt unrewarding? When the divine felt distant and unreachable? When your heart ached for just one sign but received none? You stayed. And loyalty proven in silence carries exponentially more weight in the spiritual realm than obedience shown in comfort. Here's the shift you may not have noticed yet. You stopped defining yourself by what you received from the divine and started defining yourself by who you were with the divine. That's not transactional faith. That's relationship, surrender, trust. And through it all, you didn't collapse. You shook, you wept, you questioned, but your core held. Your values didn't bend. Your compassion didn't harden into bitterness. That's not luck. That's character, and character is what kingdoms are built on. Behind the scenes, while you waited, things were being rearranged. Obstacles you couldn't see were being removed. Paths were being aligned in the unseen realm. The silence protected the process from your well-meaning interference. If you'd known too soon, you might have rushed, resisted, or tried to control what required absolute surrender. Think of a teacher during an exam. They don't whisper answers. They step back, not because they've lost faith in you, but because they believe you're ready to demonstrate what you've truly learned. The silence wasn't doubt in you, it was confidence. And in that quiet, you learned to hear differently, not just through emotions or signs, but through peace, through conviction, through a deep inner knowing that doesn't need external validation to be true. You moved without feeling inspired. You obeyed without emotional confirmation. That's not robotic faith, that's anchored faith. The kind that doesn't rise and fall with circumstances. You also stopped negotiating. No more bargaining with the divine. No more, if you do this, I'll do that. Just alignment. Surrender replaced demand. And in that surrender, real power was born. So if you still carry guilt or confusion from that season, lay it down now. The silence wasn't punishment. It was privilege. Not everyone is trusted enough to walk through it and come out refined, not ruined. You didn't pass the test by being perfect. You passed it by being consistent. Same values, same integrity, same quiet alignment, even when no one saw. No one affirmed and nothing changed on the outside. And the divine noticed. Not just your actions, but how you treated people who could no longer benefit you. How you spoke when frustrated. How you held disappointment without letting it poison your heart. Heaven keeps records of obedience that never goes viral. So stop minimizing what you endured. You didn't just survive, you stayed yourself. Not hardened, not broken, not bitter, refined, softer, wiser. That's not luck. That's proof you're ready. And here's what changes everything. The divine's response to your trial wasn't disappointment. It was approval. Not loud celebration, but deep settled confidence in you. Not because you were flawless, but because your character held under fire. Talent can be given, skill can be taught, but character? That's forged in silence, tested in delay, proven in private, and yours passed. The shift has already happened in the unseen realm. Authority has been granted. Trust has increased. Doors closed not as loss, but as divine repositioning, clearing space for what aligns with who you've become. You may not see it yet in your circumstances, but you'll feel it in your peace, in your calm, in the way criticism no longer shakes you, in how you no longer chase validation or force outcomes. That's not complacency, that's anchored authority, the kind that moves with clarity, not chaos. And yes, blessings are coming, but not always as fireworks. Sometimes as quiet clarity, steady peace, unshakable knowing. Because the divine isn't building something flashy, they're building something sustainable. This season of testing is over. You're no longer being refined, you're being entrusted. And that changes everything. Survivors are protected, but stewards, they're given responsibility. And you've moved into that place. Don't expect thunder. The real miracle already happened. You became someone who can carry what's coming without losing your soul. And that stunned heaven. Now stay grounded. Don't carry what isn't yours. The divine's response includes restraint, not as limitation, but as protection. If something falls apart now, it's not punishment. It's preservation. Your energy, focus, and peace are being guarded more fiercely. Because what you carry now is sacred and must be sustained. Tangible blessings are coming, but they'll arrive in rhythm, with your capacity to hold them without distortion. The divine doesn't overwhelm those it trusts. It equips them wisely, gradually, with precision. And here's the quiet miracle. What comes next won't cost you your peace. It will deepen it. You're no longer being asked to prove your faith. That season is over. Now you're invited to partner, not chase, not perform, not survive. You're moving from "Am I enough?" to "I am ready," and heaven recognizes readiness. So don't rush, don't over-explain, don't announce prematurely. Just stay aligned. What the divine approves, the divine sustains, and nothing can undo that. This isn't the end of your journey. It's the end of unnecessary pressure and the beginning of purposeful movement. Life after the test doesn't explode, it settles. Your nervous system calms. Anxiety loses its grip. Delays no longer panic you. Silence feels like safety, not abandonment. You're no longer scanning for danger, you know you're held. Your relationship with time shifts. You move with intention, not urgency. You wait without fear, act without desperation. Discernment sharpens. You sense misalignment instantly, not out of judgment, but awareness. You choose peace over proximity. Access to you is now earned, not assumed. Relationships change too. You stop forcing connection. Let people go when they drift. Appreciate those who stay. No more emotional overextension. That's not coldness, it's maturity. Some will be drawn to your calm like moths to flame. Others may feel unsettled by it, not because you've changed, but because your presence now reflects a frequency that exposes what's hidden in them. That's not your burden to fix. Stay kind, stay neutral, stay grounded. Prayer becomes quieter, stronger, less pleading, more alignment. Opposition, you respond with wisdom, not reaction. Rest, you embrace it, because growth doesn't require suffering. You know who you are now. Compliments don't inflate you. Criticism doesn't crush you. Your worth isn't up for debate. But heed this warning. Passing the test doesn't mean you can move carelessly. It means you must move consciously. Don't return to old patterns just because they feel familiar. Comfort isn't always alignment. Don't overshare your process with those who didn't walk the fire with you. Wisdom is diluted when offered to unready ears. Don't confuse peace with complacency. Stay disciplined, not out of fear, but out of reverence for what's been entrusted to you. Resistance may rise, not to break you, but to distract you. Guard your peace fiercely. It's not passive. It's protected. And if you feel restless in the calm, that's not doubt. It's readiness. Something within knows movement is coming. Just wait for the signal. You're not behind, not late, not missing out. Your timing is sacred. Others' paths aren't your assignment. This is your confirmation. You passed the test by staying true without pressure. Now your work is to stay true with peace. That's a different discipline, but you're ready. So rest your mind. Release the need to force outcomes. You're exactly where you need to be. The silence had purpose. The waiting had meaning. And now, you stand in quiet assurance, not because everything's visible, but because your soul is finally stable. Carry this season with humility. Guard your peace like the treasure it is. Stay prayerful, not desperate but connected. Let your life speak softly. Let your presence lead without noise. If this settled something in you, let it anchor you. Share it with someone who needs this truth. Comment, "I trust the divine timing of my life." Not as a wish, but as a declaration. You've been prepared. You've been approved. And you are exactly where you're meant to be. Now, what's activated in you isn't just blessing. It's power. And how you wield it next changes everything.